She found him in the forbidden gardens where no human should walk, trembling beneath ancient stone arches, his small body pulsing with light that shouldn't exist. He was dying from something she couldn't name, and the shadows around him were closing in like wolves. The midnight bells had been tolling through Noctivar's citadel for what felt like hours. The kind of deep, resonant chimes that vibrated through stone floors and reminded servants exactly what ruled these halls. Petra Higgins watched her reflection waver in the polished marble as she pushed her cleaning cart down the eastern corridor, her breath barely a whisper in the vast emptiness. The ornate clock above the servants' passage showed 2:47 a.m. She'd been working since sundown, scrubbing bloodstains from the banquet hall until midnight, then moving to the endless task of polishing floors that would only be dirted again by dawn. She'd been a palace maid for 8 months now, ever since the orphanage turned her out at 18 with nothing but a reference letter and a warning: keep your head down. Don't ask questions. Survive. Her hands ached in her worn cotton gloves. Her stomach had been empty since the stale bread she'd eaten at shift change, saving her coin rations for the end of the week when food prices always climbed. When the landlord came knocking, the night supervisor's voice crackled through the old communication tube in the wall. East Gardens. Someone left the gate open. Close it before the dawn patrol notices. Petra's throat tightened with something close to dread. That small task meant she might avoid a demerit on her record. It meant she wouldn't be reassigned to the lower dungeons where maids whispered that girls sometimes didn't return. It meant she'd keep this job for another month. She abandoned her cart and grabbed the iron key ring from its hook. The gardens. She'd only glimpsed them through windows during her training, sprawling labyrinths of night-blooming flowers and marble fountains that the vampire nobility used for their private gatherings. Places where humans existed only to serve, never to linger. Petra pushed through the servant's door into the night air. The cold hit like a physical blow, sharp and unnatural. The garden stretched before her in shadows and silver moonlight, statues looming like sentinels, their stone eyes seeming to track her movement. No torches burned here. No guards patrolled. Just the whisper of wind through iron gates and the distant sound of the citadel breathing. She was 15 paces into the garden when she heard it. Crying. Not just any crying, the broken, gasping sobs of a terrified child. One small voice, lost and desperate in the darkness. Petra froze, the key ring slipping from her trembling fingers. It clattered against stone, forgotten. Hello? Her voice came out smaller than she intended, swallowed by the garden's oppressive silence. Is someone hurt? The crying stuttered, then intensified, frightened, abandoned, fading. Petra's feet moved before her mind could stop them. She followed the sound deeper into the garden, past fountain sculptures of ancient vampire lords, beneath archways carved with runes that seemed to pulse faintly in her peripheral vision. Then she saw him. A small boy, no more than 5 years old, sat huddled against a stone pillar. His clothes were fine silk, now torn and dirty. His bare feet were scraped and bleeding. Even in the darkness, she could see the strange blue luminescence beneath his pale skin, like lightning trapped under glass, flickering with each shuddering breath. But it was what surrounded him that made Petra's heart stop. Shadows. Not natural darkness, but things, writhing forms with too many edges and eyes that gleamed red in the moonlight. They circled the boy like predators testing their prey, drawing closer with each of his weakening cries. Protective wards, she realized with horror. He'd triggered some kind of ancient defense magic, and it was killing him. Get away from him. Petra lunged forward, her body acting on pure instinct. She threw herself between the boy and the nearest shadow creature, her arms spreading wide despite having no weapon, no power, nothing but her mortal flesh. The shadow recoiled, just for a moment, as if surprised. The boy's small fingers clutched at her uniform. Please, he whimpered, his voice hoarse from screaming. Don't let them take me. Don't let me disappear. Petra dropped to her knees and pulled him against her chest. His body was cold, so cold, but that blue light pulsed brighter at her touch. The shadows hissed and retreated another foot. "I've got you," she whispered, her voice shaking but fierce. "I'm not leaving you. I promise." She had no idea who this child was. She couldn't explain the magic writhing around them. She didn't understand why her presence seemed to calm the deadly wards. All she knew was that a child was dying, and everyone else had left him alone in the dark. Her mind raced. No guards. No nurses. No one responding to his cries. Either they couldn't hear him through whatever magic trapped this place, or, the thought made her blood run cold, someone wanted him to die out here. "We're going back inside," Petra said, trying to sound braver than she felt. She scooped the boy into her arms. His weight was almost nothing, too light for a child his size. "Stay with me. Just stay." The temperature plummeted. The shadows fled. And Petra understood, in that terrible instant of clarity, that something far more dangerous than ward magic had just arrived. The air itself seemed to tear open. Darkness poured into the garden like liquid night, and with it came a presence so overwhelming that Petra's knees nearly buckled. Power. Ancient, absolute, and furious. He materialized from the darkness itself, a figure in black armor and flowing cloak, 7 feet of lethal grace and barely contained violence. His face was sharp angles and cold beauty, skin pale as death, eyes burning crimson in the moonlight. Fangs gleamed as his lips pulled back in a snarl. The Vampire King. Petra had never seen him up close. No servant ever did and lived to speak of it casually. But she knew him from the portraits in the Great Hall, from the whispered warnings in the servants' quarters. Sorenvald Noctivar. The Eternal Sovereign. The Blood Crown. Monster. Tyrant. Death made flesh. His gaze swept the garden, taking in the dissipating wards, the scorch marks on stone, the abandoned pillar, and finally landed on Petra. On the human maid holding his son. His eyes widened fractionally, the only sign of shock on that terrible, beautiful face. "Elion." The king's voice was a rumble of thunder and broken glass. The boy in Petra's arms lifted his head weakly. "Father," he whimpered. The king moved like lightning. One moment he stood 10 paces away, the next, he loomed over them both, his presence suffocating. His hand shot out, not toward his son, but toward Petra's throat. She should have run. Should have dropped the boy and begged for mercy. Should have done anything except what she did. Petra held Elion tighter and met the Vampire King's burning gaze. He was alone, she said, her voice barely steady. He was dying. And no one came. The king's hand stopped. Inches from her neck. His eyes narrowed, searching her face with an intensity that felt like being flayed alive. "You are human." Not a question. An accusation. "Yes. You touched my heir. You entered a blood-warded garden." His voice dropped to something more dangerous than a shout. "You should be ash." "I know." "Then why?" He seemed unable to finish the question. His gaze dropped to his son, and something cracked in that inhuman face. "Elion. Elion, look at me." But the boy only burrowed deeper into Petra's embrace, his small hands fisting in her uniform, that strange blue light pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat now. The king stared. For one long, impossible moment, the most powerful creature in the kingdom simply stared at the impossible sight before him, his untamable, traumatized heir, calm in the arms of a human servant. When Sorenvald Noctivar looked at Petra again, something had shifted in those crimson eyes. Not gratitude. Not mercy. Recognition. "What is your name?" "Petra." "Petra Higgins." "Petra Higgins." He spoke it slowly, as if committing it to memory. To fate. You have interfered with matters far beyond your understanding. You have broken laws written in blood before your grandmother's grandmother drew breath. Petra's throat went dry. I'm sorry, Your Majesty, You will come with me. Now. His hand moved to Elion, gentler than she thought possible, brushing his son's hair back. Both of you. I don't understand. You saved my son when my own guards failed. When my council's wards nearly killed him. The king's voice went lethal. That means you are now the most dangerous person in this citadel, human. To yourself. To him. To everyone. He reached down, and this time Petra couldn't stop him. The king lifted Elion from her arms with devastating care, cradling the boy against his armored chest. Elion's glow dimmed immediately, and he began to cry again. The king's jaw clenched. He looked at Petra with something between fury and desperation. Walk beside me. Keep him calm. And pray to whatever gods you worship that I decide you're worth keeping alive. Before Petra could answer, before she could process what was happening, the king's free hand locked around her wrist like an iron shackle. You are mine now, Petra Higgins. His voice was a death sentence and a promise. Until I decide what to do with you. In that single choice, rushing to save a crying child in a forbidden garden, Petra had crossed a line she hadn't known existed. From invisible servant to the Vampire King's obsession. From nobody to the one person who could soothe the air of darkness. From safe anonymity to the center of a deadly game she didn't understand. But as the king pulled her through the garden toward the citadel's black heart, Elion's small hand reached back and found hers. And Petra knew, with terrible certainty, that she would burn the world before she let this child suffer alone again. Even if that world was ruled by monsters. Even if one of those monsters now owned her life. The king's private wing existed in a different world than the servants' quarters. Petra's worn shoes sank into carpet so thick they swallowed sound. Tapestries older than her bloodline hung from walls carved with symbols that seemed to writhe in the torchlight. Everything here breathed power and permanence, a reminder that she was not meant to exist in this space. Sorenvald Noctivar moved through his domain like a storm-given form, Elion cradled against his chest, one hand still locked around Petra's wrist. Servants materialized from shadows to open doors, then vanished just as quickly, their eyes carefully averted. But Petra felt their stares burning into her back the moment they passed. A human. Here. Touching the king. They would be whispering before dawn reached the lower halls. The king shouldered through a set of double doors into a chamber that stole Petra's breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the citadel's sprawling darkness. A massive bed dominated one side, its posts carved into snarling wolves. But it was the smaller bed in the adjacent room, visible through an archway, that made her chest tighten. A child's room. Toys scattered across expensive rugs. A mobile of silver stars hanging motionless above silk sheets. Elion had been sleeping here. Safe. Until someone took him. The king lowered his son onto the large bed with a gentleness that seemed impossible from those lethal hands. Elion's fingers immediately reached for Petra, his face crumpling. The blue glow beneath his skin pulsed brighter, more frantic. Father, don't, the boy's voice broke. Don't make her leave. Sorenvald's jaw clenched. He straightened slowly, his crimson gaze moving between his son and the human maid who somehow anchored him. For a long moment, the most powerful creature in Noxvalis said nothing. Then he released Petra's wrist. Sit with him. It wasn't a request. Petra moved to the bedside on trembling legs. The mattress was ridiculously soft as she perched on its edge. Elion immediately crawled into her lap, his small body still too cold, still shaking. She wrapped her arms around him instinctively, and the blue light dimmed to a gentle pulse. His breathing steadied. The king watched this with an expression Petra couldn't read. Something between wonder and fury. Your Majesty. A voice came from the doorway, smooth and measured. A man stepped into the chamber, tall and silver-haired, dressed in the deep blue robes of High Council. His eyes were ancient amber, sharp with intelligence. I came as soon as I heard the heir was found. Maelstrom. The king didn't turn from Petra and Elion. How convenient. Where were you when my son was taken from his bed? When the blood wards I commissioned failed. When my guards stood deaf to his screams. Lord Maelstrom's expression tightened. The wards didn't fail, Your Majesty. They were sabotaged. I've been investigating the council chambers. Someone used a master override, something that requires council authority. The king's voice went deadly quiet. 3 members have such access. Vardos. Celine. Myself. Maelstrom's gaze flicked to Petra, then back to his king. I was overseeing the eastern border reports when the heir disappeared. Celine was in her estates. But Vardos was conveniently absent from tonight's security briefing. The king's hands curled into fists. He moves against me. Against my son. He moves against the throne itself. Maelstrom stepped closer, his voice dropping. And now you've brought a human into your private chambers. The girl who somehow walked through blood wards that should have killed her on contact. Vardos will call it witchcraft. He'll demand her execution before the full council. Petra's blood turned to ice. Execution. The king's gaze finally left his son, fixing on her with an intensity that made her feel transparent. She saved my heir when my own kingdom tried to murder him. I don't care what Vardos demands. Then what do you intend to do with her? Maelstrom asked carefully. Sorenvald looked at Elion, peaceful for the first time in hours, sleeping against the human's chest. That strange blue glow had faded completely, leaving only a child exhausted from terror. She calms him. The heir's power responds to her presence. The king's voice carried the weight of absolute decision. Therefore, she stays. Your Majesty, the law. I am the law. The king moved closer to Petra, looming over her. She forced herself not to flinch, not to look away from those burning eyes. You are bound to my son now, Petra Higgins. You will remain in this wing. You will not leave without my permission. You will protect him as you did tonight. And if I refuse? The words escaped before she could stop them. Something almost like respect flickered across his face. Then you die, and Elion suffers. Choose. It wasn't a choice at all. I'll stay, Petra whispered. The king nodded once. Lord Maelstrom, summon the council at dawn. I want Vardos and every conspirator identified before sunset tomorrow. He looked down at his sleeping son. And double the guard on this wing. If anyone besides myself or Maelstrom enters without clearance, kill them. As Maelstrom departed with a bow, the king pulled a chair close to the bed. He sat, a monster in armor, watching his heir sleep in a human's arms. You should rest, he said quietly. Tomorrow, half my kingdom will want you dead. Petra tightened her hold on Elion. Then tomorrow, they'll have to go through me first. The Vampire King smiled. It was a terrible, beautiful thing. Yes, he murmured. They will. Dawn came too quickly. Petra woke to find herself still in the king's chambers, Elion curled against her side like a small anchor. Sunlight filtered through enchanted glass that turned the deadly rays into harmless amber glow. The king stood at the window, a silhouette against the light, watching the citadel wake. He hadn't slept. She'd felt his gaze on her throughout the night, heavy and assessing. The council convenes in 1 hour. His voice cut through the silence. You will attend. Petra's stomach dropped. Your Majesty, I'm not. You are the reason this meeting exists. He turned, his face sharp in the morning light. Vardos will demand justice for broken laws. You will stand before the council and answer for your crimes. What crimes? Saving your son. Entering blood-warded grounds. Touching the royal heir. Surviving magic designed to kill humans on contact. The king's expression was unreadable. In their eyes, you are either a witch or a weapon. Both are punishable by death. Elion stirred, his small hand tightening in Petra's uniform. Don't let them take her, father. Please. Something cracked in the king's face. He crossed to the bed, kneeling to eye level with his son. I won't. I promise. His gaze shifted to Petra. But she must face them. We must know who stands against us. An hour later, Petra walked through corridors lined with vampire nobility, their eyes tracking her like predators watching prey. Lord Maelstrom led the way, his presence a thin shield against the whispers that followed. The king strode behind her, Elion riding on his shoulders, the boy's fingers twisted in his father's dark hair. The council chamber was a cathedral of power. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow. A circular table of black marble dominated the center, 12 high-backed chairs arranged around it. 11 were filled. The 12th, the king's throne, stood empty and waiting. Petra was made to stand in the center of that circle. Exposed. Judged. Sorenvald. The voice came from a vampire in crimson robes, his face aristocratic and cold. Lord Vardos. Petra recognized him from servant gossip, the king's chief rival, ambitious and ancient. You summon us at dawn with no explanation, parade a human through our halls, and seat your heir at council for the first time. What game is this? The king lowered Elion into his throne, then stood behind him, hands on his son's shoulders. A portrait of protection. No game, Vardos. An execution. The word sent ice through Petra's veins. Whose? Vardos smiled, showing fangs. His gaze slid to Petra. The humans, I assume. For violating. Yours. The king's voice was a blade. For treason. For conspiracy to murder my heir. For sabotaging blood wards that have protected this citadel for 3 centuries. The chamber erupted. Voices overlapped, denials and accusations flying. Vardos rose slowly, his face a mask of manufactured shock. You accuse me based on what evidence? The word of this servant. He gestured dismissively at Petra. She is human. She has no right to speak in this chamber, let alone level accusations against council. She speaks nothing. Lord Maelstrom's voice cut through the chaos. He stood, producing a crystalline orb that pulsed with recorded memory. The ward stones speak. I retrieved this from the Eastern Garden at midnight. It shows the override sequence used to disable protections. A sequence only 3 people possess. He activated the orb. Images flickered above the table, shadows moving through the garden, hooded figures tampering with ancient runes, and there, clear as death, Vardos's signet ring glowing as it pressed against the ward stone. I was investigating reports of refugees at the eastern border, Vardos said smoothly, too smoothly. Someone must have stolen my access. Your ring never left your finger. The king's voice dropped to something inhuman. I had you followed for weeks, Vardos. Every secret meeting with border lords who want my throne. Every bribe to guards who should be loyal. Every whispered promise that the heir would die and the kingdom would be yours. Petra watched Vardos's mask slip. Just for a moment. Long enough to see the calculation behind his eyes. You have no proof of intent, Vardos said carefully. Ward tampering could be argued as maintenance. Then explain why my son was found dying in that garden. The king's hands tightened on Elion's shoulders. Explain why the same night you disabled the wards, for assassins infiltrated the palace. We found their bodies in the lower halls. They wore your house colors beneath their cloaks. The council erupted again. Some voices rose in Vardos's defense, others in condemnation. Petra realized with growing horror that the council was split. Half wanted the king's power. Half feared it. Even if I believed these accusations, Vardos said, his voice rising above the chaos, you still harbor a human in your private chambers. A human who broke our most sacred laws. Whatever crimes you claim I've committed, she has violated older taboos. Blood law demands her death. Blood law. The king smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Petra had ever seen. How convenient that you invoke it now. Very well. Let us speak of blood law. He moved around his throne, standing fully before the council. Blood law states that any human who survives the blood wards has been chosen by ancient magic. Marked. Protected. To kill such a human is to defy the very foundations our kingdom was built upon. Vardos's expression darkened. The wards were sabotaged. Her survival means nothing. Her survival means everything. The king's voice filled the chamber like thunder. She walked through wards that should have reduced her to ash. She calmed my heir when even I could not. She risked her life when my own guards stood deaf to his screams. He looked at Petra, and for a moment, she saw something in his eyes that wasn't calculation or strategy. Something almost like respect. This human is under my protection. Any who move against her move against the throne itself. Vardos stood slowly. Then you choose her over your council. Over centuries of law. I choose, the king said quietly, to protect what is mine. The chamber fell silent. Then Vardos smiled. So be it, your majesty. But know this, you've just started a war you cannot win. He swept from the chamber, taking 5 council members with him. Petra stood in the circle, understanding finally settling over her like a shroud. She hadn't just saved a child. She'd ignited a civil war. The king's silence was worse than his fury. He dismissed the remaining council members with a wave, then stood motionless at the head of the table, his jaw clenched so tight Petra could see the muscle jumping beneath his pale skin. Elion had climbed down from the throne and pressed himself against her legs, trembling. Your Majesty. Lord Maelstrom's voice was careful. Vardos will move quickly now. He has support in the eastern provinces, and with 5 council members backing him. I know what he has. The king's eyes flashed crimson. Prepare the loyal houses. I want troop counts by nightfall. He finally looked at Petra, and she saw exhaustion beneath the fury. Exhaustion and something that looked dangerously like fear. Take them back to my chambers. Both of them. Now. Maelstrom bowed and gestured for Petra to follow. She scooped Elion into her arms, his small face buried against her neck, and hurried from the chamber. Behind her, she heard glass shatter as the king's control finally broke. The walk back felt longer. Servants no longer just stared, they scattered at her approach, making signs against evil. One older woman spat at Petra's feet. Another whispered, which, loud enough to hear. By the time they reached the king's wing, Petra's hands were shaking. Ignore them, Maelstrom said quietly as he opened the chamber doors. Fear makes people cruel. You represent change, and change terrifies the comfortable. I didn't ask for this. Petra's voice cracked. I just wanted to help him. I know. The advisor's ancient eyes were kind. That's what makes you dangerous. Real compassion always is. He left them alone. Petra set Elion on the floor, but the boy refused to release her hand. His blue glow had returned, pulsing faintly beneath his skin, brighter with each passing moment. Does it hurt? Petra asked gently. Elion shook his head, but his grip tightened. It feels like lightning. Like something inside me wants to get out, but I don't know how to let it. His voice dropped to a whisper. The nurses always ran away when it started. They said I was cursed. Petra's heart broke. She knelt to his level. You're not cursed. You're just powerful. And power is scary when you don't understand it. You're not scared of me. No. She smiled. I'm not. The glow intensified. Blue light spread from Elion's hands up his arms, crawling across his small chest like living electricity. His eyes widened in panic. Petra, I can't stop it. Hey, look at me. Petra cupped his face in her hands. The moment her skin touched his, the light pulsed once, twice, then began to change. Instead of wild and erratic, it flowed in steady waves, syncing with her heartbeat. That's it. Just breathe with me. Elion's breathing steadied. The light didn't disappear, but it stabilized, forming intricate patterns across his skin, runes that glowed and faded in rhythm. Ancient symbols that Petra had seen carved into the garden stones, into the palace walls, into the very foundation of Nox Vallis. What's happening? Elion whispered, watching the light dance across his hands. I don't know. Petra stared at the runes forming where their skin connected. But I think you're supposed to do this. I think this is who you are. The chamber door slammed open. The king stood in the doorway, taking in the scene, his sun glowing like a small star, the human maid at the center of it, their hands clasped as magic Petra shouldn't be able to touch flowed between them. Don't move. His voice was rough. He crossed the room in 3 strides, kneeling beside them. His hand hovered over Elion's shoulder, hesitant. Elion, can you hear me? Father, look. Elion's voice was filled with wonder instead of fear. It doesn't hurt anymore. Petra makes it quiet. The king's gaze shifted to Petra, and she saw the exact moment his world reorganized around this new truth. You're not just calming him. You're channeling his power. Grounding it. His voice dropped to something between awe and horror. That's impossible. Humans can't interface with royal bloodline magic. I'm not doing anything, Petra protested. I'm just. You're bonding with him. The king grabbed her free hand, turning it over to reveal her palm. Blue runes had begun to trace across her skin, mirror images of the patterns on Elion's. They glowed softly, then faded, but Petra could feel them there beneath the surface. Permanent. Changed. The magic is marking you. Claiming you as his anchor. What does that mean? The king released her hand slowly, something like resignation settling over his features. It means he needs you to survive. Without an anchor, his power will consume him before he reaches his 10th year. Every royal heir needs one, usually a blood relative, sometimes a bonded familiar. His jaw clenched. Never a human. This shouldn't be possible. But it is possible, Lord Maelstrom's voice came from the doorway. He must have followed the king. His expression was grave. Which means Vardos will move even faster. An heir with a human anchor. The traditionalists will never accept it. They'll call it corruption. Abomination. Let them call it what they want. The king stood, pulling Elion up with him. The boy immediately reached for Petra, and she rose, keeping their hands connected. The runes pulsed once more, then settled into a steady glow. She is his anchor. That makes her untouchable by every law we have. It also makes her a target, Maelstrom said quietly. Kill her, and the heir dies. Vardos knows this now. He'll send assassins before the week is out. The king looked at Petra, really looked at her, seeing not just a servant but a weapon. A vulnerability. A necessity. Then we protect her. His hands settled on her shoulder, and Petra felt the weight of that touch like a brand. From this moment forward, Petra Higgins is under royal protection. She doesn't leave this wing without guard. She doesn't eat food I haven't tested. She doesn't breathe without someone loyal watching. Your Majesty. You wanted to help my son. The king's voice was soft, dangerous. Congratulations. You're bound to him until one of you dies. Welcome to the royal family, Petra. It wasn't a welcome. It was a life sentence. And as Elion's small hand squeezed hers, his power humming contentedly through their connection, Petra realized she wouldn't have chosen differently even if she could. 3 days passed in the king's chambers like a beautiful cage. Petra slept on a chaise near Elion's smaller bed, waking every few hours when his power flickered and needed grounding. She ate food the king tested first, touching his lips to every bite before allowing it near her. She wore clothes that appeared in the wardrobe, fine fabrics that felt wrong against her skin, servants' hands in noble silk. She did not see the sun except through enchanted glass. She did not speak to anyone except Elion, the king, and Maelstrom. And she did not stop feeling the eyes of the citadel pressing against the walls, waiting, watching, hungry. On the 4th morning, Isabel came. Petra was reading to Elion from a book of ancient fables when the knock came, 3 sharp raps. The king looked up from his desk where he'd been reviewing troop reports, his hand moving instinctively to the blade at his hip. Lord Maelstrom, Your Majesty, the guard announced. With a human visitor requesting audience with the anchor. Petra's heart stopped. Human visitor. Isabel? The king's eyes narrowed. You know this person. She's my friend. My only friend. Petra stood, desperate. Please, Your Majesty. I haven't spoken to anyone from my old life. I need to know she's safe. Something flickered across his face. Almost like understanding. Maelstrom wouldn't bring her if she posed a threat. 5 minutes. I'll be watching. The door opened. Isabel Chambers burst through, her brown eyes wide with fear and relief. She was still in her servant's uniform, her hair escaping its bun, her hands twisting together nervously. The moment she saw Petra, tears spilled down her cheeks. Oh God, Petra! Isabel rushed forward, then froze as the king rose from his desk. She dropped into a clumsy curtsy. Your Majesty, forgive me, You care for her. It wasn't a question. The king's gaze assessed Isabel with predatory precision. Speak freely. But quickly. Isabel turned to Petra, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Everyone's talking. They're saying you bewitched the heir. That you're a spy from the eastern provinces. That the king keeps you locked up here for dark rituals. Her hands found Petra's, squeezing tight. The head housekeeper discharged me yesterday. Said anyone associated with you is contaminated. Petra, I have nowhere to go. They've blacklisted me from every position in the citadel. Guilt crashed through Petra's chest. Isabel, I'm so sorry. I never meant. I know. Isabel's smile was shaky. I know you just helped a scared kid. But they don't care about truth. They care about sides. And Vardos is telling everyone you're the reason the kingdom is splitting apart. She is the reason, the king said quietly from behind them. Both women jumped. He'd moved without sound, standing close enough that Petra could feel the cold radiating from his body. But not in the way Vardos claims. Tell me, Isabel Chambers, where do your loyalties lie? Isabel's throat worked. With Petra. Always. Even if that means opposing half the kingdom. Even then. The king studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to Maelstrom, who'd been watching silently from the doorway. The anchor needs attendance. Someone she trusts. Someone whose loyalty is to her, not to politics. His gaze returned to Isabel. You'll be housed in the adjoining chamber. You'll assist Petra with the heir. You'll report any threats directly to me. In exchange, you'll be paid triple a senior maid's wage and granted royal protection. Isabel's eyes went wide. Your Majesty, I'm not qualified. You're loyal. That's the only qualification that matters anymore. The king's voice hardened. But understand this, if you betray her, if you bring danger to my son, I will make your death last weeks. Are we clear? Isabel nodded, pale but resolute. Crystal clear, Your Majesty. Good. He moved back to his desk. Maelstrom, get her settled. And increase the guard rotation. If Vardos is spreading propaganda, he's preparing for something. As Isabel was led away to her new chambers, promising to return within the hour, Petra felt the walls of her cage shift slightly. Not freedom. But perhaps something less lonely. That night, the first assassination attempt came. Petra woke to Elion's scream, his power flaring wild and bright in the darkness. She lunged for him instinctively, their connection snapping into place, but through the blue glow she saw them, 3 figures in black, emerging from shadows that shouldn't exist, blades gleaming as they moved toward the small bed. Elion, to me. Petra threw herself between the boy and the assassins, her body the only shield she had. The lead assassin raised his blade. Move, human. The heir dies tonight. No. Petra's voice shook, but she didn't move. You'll have to kill me first. Gladly. The blade descended. Petra closed her eyes, pulling Elion tight against her chest, feeling his power surge through their bond. The assassin's head hit the floor before his body did. The king stood behind the corpse, his sword dark with blood, his eyes burning crimson with a fury that made the air itself recoil. He moved like death given form, cutting down the second assassin before the man could turn. The third tried to flee back into shadow, but the king's hand shot out, catching him by the throat. Who sent you? The king's voice was barely human. Who gave you shadow passage into my chambers? The assassin spat blood. Hail the new order. Hail, Lord. The king crushed his throat before he could finish. The body crumpled. Silence fell, broken only by Elion's sobbing and Petra's ragged breathing. The king turned slowly, his gaze finding her in the darkness. Blood painted his face, his hands, his armor. He looked every inch the monster the servants whispered about. But his hands were gentle as he reached for her, checking for wounds with a desperation that spoke of fear. You stood between them and my son. His voice was hoarse. You nearly died. I know, Petra whispered. Why? Because he needed me to. The king stared at her, something breaking and reforming in his expression. Then he pulled both her and Elion against his chest, holding them with a fierceness that had nothing to do with duty and everything to do with something far more dangerous. Never again, he breathed against her hair. I will burn this kingdom to ash before I let them touch either of you. And Petra believed him. The king didn't let go for a long time. Even after guards flooded the chamber, even after Maelstrom arrived barking orders to search every shadow passage in the citadel, Sorenvald Noctivar kept Petra and Elion pressed against him like he could shield them from the world through sheer will alone. When he finally released them, something fundamental had shifted in his eyes. Something that made Petra's breath catch. No more, he said quietly. No more half measures. No more waiting for Vardos to show his hand. He looked at Maelstrom. Mobilize the loyal houses. I want troops surrounding the citadel by dawn. And find me every council member who's been in contact with Vardos. I want names. Your Majesty, that could mean arresting a third of the nobility. Then arrest them. The king's voice was iron. My son almost died tonight. In my own chambers. Under my protection. His gaze found Petra. She almost died defending him. I'm done playing politics. Maelstrom bowed and departed. Isabel appeared moments later, her face pale with terror, pulling Elion into her arms so Petra could stand. The boy went reluctantly, his power still pulsing, reaching for Petra across the space between them. The king caught Petra's arm before she could follow. Come with me. He led her through a hidden door she hadn't known existed, down a spiral staircase into chambers deeper and older than the rest of the citadel. The air here tasted of ancient magic and stone. Torches lit themselves as they passed, casting dancing shadows on walls carved with thousands of names. The Blood Vault, the king said quietly. Where every royal heir's power first manifests. Where we keep the records of every anchor bond in our history. He stopped before a massive book, its pages yellowed with age, bound in leather that looked disturbingly like skin. There are 17 documented cases of human anchors. 17 in 3,000 years. He opened the book, his fingers tracing faded ink. Every single one was executed within a month. The council couldn't accept that a human could be essential to vampire royalty. They found excuses. Accusations of witchcraft. Claims of corruption. But the truth? His voice dropped. They were afraid. Afraid that humans weren't as beneath us as we claimed. Petra stared at the names. Women, mostly. Their death dates written in red ink beside their birth names. You brought me here to show me I'm going to die. I brought you here to show you I won't let history repeat. The king closed the book with deliberate care. Every one of these anchors died because their king chose politics over protection. Chose the council's approval over their heir's survival. His crimson eyes found hers. I am not those kings. Then what are you? Desperate. The word came out raw. My son's power is stronger than any heir in recorded history. Without you, it will kill him before his coronation. With you. He moved closer, and Petra's back hit the stone wall. With you, he could reshape our entire world. That terrifies half my kingdom. It terrifies me too, Petra admitted. Good. Fear keeps you careful. His hand braced against the wall beside her head, caging her in. But I need you to understand something, Petra Higgins. You're not just Elion's anchor anymore. You're a symbol. Of change. Of possibility. Of everything the old order wants to destroy. I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted to help a scared child. I know. Something like pain crossed his face. That's why you're dangerous. Real compassion in a court built on fear. That's more revolutionary than any army. His other hand lifted, hovering near her face but not quite touching. Tell me honestly, do you regret it? That night in the garden. Petra thought of Elion's small hand in hers, his power humming through their bond, his smile when the nightmares faded. She thought of Isabel safe in the next chamber instead of blacklisted and starving. She thought of standing between assassins and an innocent child, choosing courage over survival. No, she whispered. I don't regret it. The king's expression shifted into something Petra couldn't name. Something that looked like wonder and agony combined. Then we fight. Together. For him. Together, Petra agreed. His hand finally touched her face, cool fingers tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. They'll call you witch. Whore. Abomination. They'll say I've been corrupted by human weakness. And what will you say? That they're right. His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and Petra's heart forgot how to beat. You've corrupted me completely. Made me choose one person's life over kingdom stability. Made me question laws I've upheld for centuries. Made me feel. He stopped, jaw clenching. Feel what? Petra barely breathed. Human. The word came out like a confession. Like a curse. The air between them crackled with tension that had nothing to do with magic. Petra could see the war in his eyes, duty against desire, king against man, monster against something that wanted desperately to be neither. Then footsteps echoed down the staircase. The king pulled back instantly, his expression shuddering closed, the vulnerable moment disappearing behind cold authority. Maelstrom appeared, his face grim. "Your Majesty, we found something." The shadow passages were opened from inside the royal wing. "Someone with access to your personal chambers gave the assassins entry." The king's hands curled into fists. "Who?" "We don't know yet. But whoever it is, they're close to you. Very close." Maelstrom's gaze flicked to Petra. "The anchor isn't safe here anymore. Nowhere in the citadel is safe. Then we leave." The king's voice was decided. "There's a fortress in the northern mountains. Ancient. Defensible. We'll take Elion and Petra there until I've purged the traitors from my court. Your Majesty, if you leave the citadel, Vardos will claim you've abandoned the throne. Let him try." The king moved toward the stairs, then paused, looking back at Petra. "Pack nothing. We leave in an hour." "And Petra?" "Yes. Stay close to me. From now on, I'm the only person in this kingdom you can trust." As he disappeared up the stairs, Petra stood alone in the vault of dead anchors, surrounded by the names of women who'd been killed for the crime of being essential. And she wondered if an hour was enough time to prepare for war. They didn't make it an hour. Petra had just returned to the king's chambers when the bells began tolling, not the measured chimes of time passing, but the frantic clanging of alarm. Elion's head snapped up from where he'd been drawing with Isabel, his eyes going wide with terror. "Father." His voice was small. The king burst through the door already armored for battle, Maelstrom at his heels. "They're breaching the gates. Vardos brought an army." His gaze locked on Petra. "How many loyal guards in the wing?" 12, Maelstrom said. "Against 200 insurgents and rising. Your Majesty, we need to move now." The king crossed to Elion, kneeling before his son. "Listen to me carefully. You're going to go with Petra and Isabel through the servant passages. Maelstrom will lead you to the northern gate where horses are waiting. You're not coming." Elion's power flared, blue light crackling across his skin. "I have to hold them here. Buy you time to escape." The king's voice was steady, but Petra saw the fear beneath it. Fear of never seeing his son again. "Be brave. Protect Petra as she protects you. Can you do that?" Elion nodded, tears streaming down his face. The king pulled him into a fierce embrace, then stood, turning to Petra. His hand caught her chin, tilting her face up to meet his burning gaze. "Keep him alive. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens to me, you run. Understand? Your Majesty." Sorenvald. His name on his own lips, offered like a gift. Like a secret. "If I'm going to die tonight, at least let me hear you say my name once." Petra's throat closed. "Sorenvald. Don't die." Something like a smile ghosted across his face. "I'll try." Then his lips were on hers, hard and desperate and tasting of violence and goodbye. The kiss lasted 3 heartbeats. An eternity. Nothing at all. He pulled back, his thumb tracing her lower lip one last time. "Go. Now." Maelstrom grabbed Petra's arm, hauling her toward the hidden panel in the wall. Isabel scooped up Elion, the boy's power pulsing wildly, reaching for Petra across the growing distance. The last thing Petra saw before the panel closed was the king drawing his sword, standing alone against the sound of boots thundering up the corridor. The servant passages were narrow and dark, lit only by Elion's glow and Maelstrom's torch. They ran through twisting tunnels that smelled of dust and old fear, Isabel's breathing harsh beside her, Elion's sobs muffled against his friend's shoulder. Almost there, Maelstrom panted. Northern gate is just. The passage ahead exploded inward. Debris rained down as figures poured through the breach, Vardos's soldiers in crimson and black, their blades already drawn. Maelstrom shoved Petra and Isabel behind him, his sword singing free. Run! Take the eastern fork. We can't leave you. That's an order. Maelstrom lunged at the first soldier, and Petra didn't see what happened next because Isabel was dragging her down a side passage, Elion clutched between them. They ran blindly through the maze of tunnels. Behind them, the sounds of fighting echoed, steel on steel, screams cut short, the wet sounds of death. Petra's lungs burned. Her legs shook. Elion's power surged with each step, making the walls shimmer with blue light. There. Isabel pointed ahead to a sliver of moonlight. An exit. Freedom. They burst out into the courtyard, and stopped cold. 10 soldiers waited, forming a semicircle around the passage exit. And at their center, smiling like a cat with cornered prey, stood Lord Vardos. The anchor. His voice was smooth as silk. How convenient. Saving me the trouble of hunting through the rubble for you. Petra pushed Elion behind her, Isabel moving to flank the boy protectively. Stay back. Or what? You'll bleed on me. Vardos laughed. You're human. Powerless. The only reason you're valuable is the parasite clinging to your skirts. His gaze shifted to Elion. Hello, little prince. Your father is dying in his chambers as we speak. Surrounded. Overwhelmed. Soon you'll be an orphan. Won't that be tragic? Liar. Elion's power flared bright enough to make the soldiers flinch. Am I? Vardos gestured, and a soldier tossed something at Petra's feet. The king's signet ring, covered in blood. Found on his severed hand. He fought well, I'm told. Killed 30 before they brought him down. Such a waste. Petra's world tilted. The ring gleamed in Elion's light, accusatory and final. Sorenvald. Dead. She'd kissed him moments ago, felt his desperate hope, his fierce protection, his. No. The word came out broken. No, you're lying. Believe what you want. It changes nothing. Vardos drew his blade. The heir dies tonight. The anchor with him. And tomorrow, I rebuild this kingdom without the stain of human corruption. He smiled. Any last words? Petra looked at Elion, this child who'd trusted her, who'd bonded with her, who needed her to survive. She looked at Isabel, trembling but standing firm, loyal to the end. She thought of Sorenvald, who'd chosen her over his kingdom, who'd made her feel seen for the first time in her life. She thought of 17 dead anchors whose names were carved in a vault, women who died quietly, erased from history. And Petra made her choice. Yes. She stepped forward, placing herself directly between Vardos and Elion. You want him? You go through me first. And I promise you, Lord of Nothing, I will make you earn every inch. Vardos's smile widened. So be it. He raised his blade. Behind Petra, Elion screamed, not in fear, but in rage. His power exploded outward in a wave of blue lightning that sent half the soldiers flying. The courtyard lit up like daylight, runes blazing to life across every stone surface, ancient magic responding to the heir's fury. And through the chaos, through the blinding light, Petra felt it, their bond snapping taut, Elion's power pouring into her like a flood, like recognition, like destiny finally clicking into place. She looked down at her hands. Blue runes covered her skin, glowing bright as stars. When she looked up, Vardos's smile had disappeared. Impossible, he breathed. Petra smiled. It was not a kind expression. You wanted to see what a human anchor can do. She felt Elion's power singing through her veins, vast and terrible and utterly hers to command. Let me show you. The lightning answered her call. Petra didn't know what she was doing. She only knew that Elion's power filled her like a second heartbeat, ancient and absolute, responding to her will as naturally as breathing. She thrust her hand forward, and blue lightning arced from her palm, striking the nearest soldier square in the chest. He went down convulsing. Vardos's eyes widened. Kill them. Now. The soldiers charged. Petra moved on instinct, pulling Elion's power through their bond and shaping it into shields, into weapons, into raw destruction. Lightning crackled around her in a protective sphere, and when the first blade struck it, the soldier screamed as electricity raced up his arm. Stay behind me. Petra shouted to Isabel and Elion. The power was growing stronger, wilder, threatening to overwhelm her. She could feel it burning through her veins, too much for a human body to contain. But Elion's small hand found hers, and suddenly the flow stabilized, the connection between them singing with perfect harmony. Together, Elion whispered, his eyes glowing blue. We do it together. The next wave of soldiers met a wall of lightning that threw them back like ragdolls. Vardos screamed orders, his composure cracking as his force was decimated by a human maid and a 5-year-old child. Enough. Vardos himself lunged forward, his blade wreathed in shadow magic, ancient and deadly. You think stolen power makes you worthy? You're still just a servant playing at nobility. His sword came down. Petra raised her free hand, and the blade shattered against a shield of pure light. The backlash sent Vardos stumbling, shock written across his aristocratic face. I never wanted to be noble, Petra said quietly. I just wanted to protect him. She channeled everything she had into one devastating blast. The lightning struck Vardos's chest, sending him crashing into the courtyard wall. He slumped, smoke rising from his armor, gasping for breath. The remaining soldiers hesitated, looking between their fallen commander and the glowing human who'd brought him down. Run, Petra said. Her voice echoed with power that wasn't entirely her own. Or join him. They ran. Silence fell over the courtyard, broken only by Elion's ragged breathing and Isabel's shocked whimper. Petra swayed, the power draining from her as quickly as it had come. Her legs gave out. Isabel caught her before she hit the ground. Petra. Petra, stay with me. I'm okay. Petra's voice was hoarse. Is Elion? I'm here. The boy pressed against her side, his glow fading to a soft pulse. You were amazing. We were amazing, Petra corrected, managing a weak smile. A groan came from across the courtyard. Vardos stirred, struggling to rise. His face was twisted with hatred and disbelief. This isn't over. The council will never accept. The council answers to me. The voice came from the archway, rough with exhaustion and pain but unmistakably alive. Sorenvald Noctivar stepped into the courtyard, his armor shattered, his sword dark with blood, a deep gash across his shoulder. But he was standing. Breathing. Real. Father. Elion tore away from Petra and Isabel, running across the stones. The king caught him with a pained grunt, holding his son with his good arm. Petra's vision blurred with tears. You're alive. The ring, Vardos said. Vardos is a liar and a traitor. The king's crimson eyes found hers across the space between them. And apparently, my anchor is also a warrior. His gaze swept the courtyard, the scorch marks, the fallen soldiers. Vardos slumped against the wall. You did this. Elion and I, together. Petra tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The king was there in an instant, kneeling beside her, his cool hand cupping her face. You wielded royal power. Human bodies aren't meant to channel that much magic. His thumb traced the runes still faintly glowing on her skin. You could have died. So could Elion. So could you. Petra's hand covered his. I told you I don't regret it. Something fierce and possessive blazed in his eyes. You magnificent, reckless, impossible woman. His forehead pressed against hers, his voice dropping to a whisper. You terrify me. Good. Now we're even. His laugh was rough, almost broken. Then his lips found hers again, and this kiss wasn't desperate or fleeting. It was a claim. A promise. A declaration before his kingdom that she was his and he was hers, politics and propriety be damned. When they finally pulled apart, Maelstrom had appeared in the archway, bloodied but alive, leaning heavily on his sword. Behind him came loyal soldiers, securing the courtyard. Your Majesty. Maelstrom bowed, wincing. The citadel is ours. Vardos's forces have surrendered or fled. The council members who supported him are in custody. His gaze shifted to Vardos, still struggling to breathe. What shall we do with the traitor? The king stood slowly, helping Petra to her feet, keeping her steady against his side. He looked at Vardos with cold finality. Lock him in the blood vault. Let him spend his remaining days staring at the names of anchors he tried to destroy. The king's arm tightened around Petra. And let him know that this time, the anchor won. Vardos spat blood. This isn't over. Others will rise. They'll never accept her. Then they'll fall like you. The king's voice carried across the courtyard, addressing not just Vardos but every noble, every guard, every person who'd questioned his choice. Petra Higgins saved my son. She wielded royal power and defended the heir when my own court conspired against him. She has proven herself in ways most of you never will. He looked down at her, and Petra saw everything he felt written in his eyes. She is under my protection. She is bonded to my heir. And anyone who moves against her moves against the throne itself. He raised his voice until it echoed off stone. From this moment forward, Petra Higgins is no longer a servant. She is the royal anchor. Guardian of the heir. And she will be treated with the respect her courage has earned. Silence. Then Maelstrom dropped to one knee. Isabel followed, tears streaming down her face. One by one, the loyal soldiers knelt. Elion took Petra's hand, his small fingers squeezing tight. Does this mean you're staying forever? Petra looked at the king, at Sorenvald, who'd chosen her over centuries of tradition, who'd fought through armies to return to them, who looked at her like she was worth burning kingdoms for. Yes, she whispered. Forever. The king smiled, and it transformed his terrible, beautiful face into something almost human. Then let them come, he said quietly, pulling both her and Elion close. Let the whole world come. They'll find us ready. In the courtyard where she'd stood powerless and alone, where she'd chosen courage over survival, Petra felt the weight of her new life settle over her shoulders. Not a cage this time. A crown. 3 weeks after the battle, Petra stood in the throne room wearing silk the color of midnight and sapphires that caught the light like captured stars. The dress had been Isabel's idea, the jewelry the king's insistence. Petra still felt like a child playing dress-up in someone else's life. Stop fidgeting. Isabel adjusted the silver circlet in Petra's hair for the 3rd time. You look like royalty. Own it. I look like a servant in expensive clothes. You look like the woman who saved the kingdom. Isabel's voice softened. And whether you believe it or not, they're starting to see that too. The throne room had been transformed for tonight's ceremony. What remained of the council, 7 members now, purged of Vardos's conspirators, sat in a semicircle before the dais. Beyond them, nobles from across Noxvalis filled the chamber, summoned to witness what the king called a new era. Their faces ranged from curious to hostile, but none dared speak against the summons. Not after what Petra had done in that courtyard. Not after the king had made his position devastatingly clear. The doors opened. Sorenvald entered with Elion at his side, both dressed in formal black and silver, father and son united in power and purpose. The king's wound had healed, leaving only a thin scar across his shoulder, a reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. His eyes found Petra immediately, and the intensity of that gaze sent heat rushing through her. 3 weeks of living in his wing, sharing meals, watching him with Elion, feeling his presence in every moment. 3 weeks of lingering touches and stolen glances and attention that grew heavier each day. 3 weeks of falling impossibly, dangerously in love with a vampire king. Sorenvald ascended the dais, Elion climbing into the smaller throne beside his father's. The boy's eyes were bright, his power a steady glow beneath his skin, stable now that Petra was near. She stood to the side, Isabel behind her, both positioned as honored attendants rather than servants. "We gather tonight," the king's voice filled the chamber, "to address the bonds that hold our kingdom together. For too long, we've clung to traditions that no longer serve us. We've called humans lesser while depending on their labor. We've named them weak while fearing their potential." His gaze swept the assembled nobles. "The recent rebellion exposed our hypocrisy. And it showed us what true strength looks like." He gestured to Petra. "Come forward." Her legs moved automatically, carrying her to the base of the dais. The noble's stares pressed against her skin like physical weight. "Petra Higgins." The king's voice softened, speaking her name. "You saved my son when those sworn to protect him failed. You wielded royal power when it should have destroyed you. You stood against armies armed only with courage and love." He descended from his throne, standing before her. "And in doing so, you changed the fate of this kingdom." He reached for her hand, turning it palm up to reveal the runes still etched faintly in her skin. "The bond between anchor and heir is sacred. Eternal. It cannot be broken by law or tradition or the fears of small minds." His thumb traced the glowing marks. "But there is another bond. One I claim now before my council and my kingdom." Petra's heart stopped. "I claim you, Petra Higgins, as mine. Not as subject. Not as servant." His crimson eyes blazed. "As consort. As equal. As the woman who will stand beside me and shape the future of Nox Vallis." Gasps rippled through the chamber. A vampire king claiming a human consort. Unthinkable. Unprecedented. Revolutionary. "Your Majesty," Lord Selene rose, her face pale. "The law forbids marriage between vampire nobility and humans. It's been absolute for. Then the law changes." The king's voice was steel. "I am rewriting every statute that diminishes human worth. Every tradition that treats them as property rather than people." He looked at the council. "You will vote to accept this, or you will be replaced by those who will." Silence fell like a blade. "All in favor," the king said softly, dangerously. One by one, hands rose. Some eager, some reluctant, all aware that opposing the king now meant opposing the anchor who'd saved the heir, the woman who'd wielded lightning and won. 7 hands. Unanimous. "Then it's done." Sorenvald's gaze returned to Petra, and the tenderness there stole her breath. "What say you, Petra? Will you have me? A monster who comes with a kingdom of complications and a son who needs you desperately and a heart that stopped beating centuries ago until you made it remember what feeling meant." Petra looked at Elion, grinning on his throne, practically bouncing with excitement. She looked at Isabel, tears streaming down her proud face. She looked at the nobles watching with varying degrees of acceptance and resignation, witnessing history reshape itself. Then she looked at Sorenvald, who'd chosen her over everything, who'd made her powerful and seen and cherished beyond measure. "Yes." The word came out clear and strong. "I'll have you." monster heart and all. His smile could have lit the world. He raised her hand to his lips, kissing the runes that bound her to his son, then turned her hand to kiss her palm, her wrist, the inside of her elbow. Each touch a promise. Each kiss a claim. Then rise, Petra Noctivar. He pulled her up the steps until she stood level with his throne. Consort of the blood crown. Guardian of the heir. The human who brought the kingdom to its knees and made me believe in impossible things. He kissed her properly then, deep and possessive, before his entire court. When they finally parted, the nobles were on their feet, not all in celebration, but all in acknowledgement. Elion launched himself from his throne into Petra's arms. Does this mean you're my mother now? Petra's throat closed. She looked at Sorenvald, who nodded, something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. If you'll have me, she whispered to the boy. Forever, Elion said, echoing her words from the courtyard. Forever, Sorenvald repeated, his arm coming around them both. And standing there between the Vampire King and his heir, wearing silk and sapphires and a crown of her own courage, Petra finally understood what she'd found that night in the garden. Not just a scared child who needed saving, but a family worth fighting for. A kingdom worth changing. And a love worth every impossible, dangerous, beautiful moment that lay ahead. 6 months later, Petra woke to find Elion asleep between her and Sorenvald, his small body warm against her side, his power humming contentedly through their bond. The boy had nightmares still, memories of that night in the garden, of feeling abandoned and hunted. On those nights, he climbed into their bed, seeking the comfort of both anchors, and neither of them had the heart to send him back to his own chambers. He's getting too comfortable with this arrangement, Sorenvald murmured, his voice rough with sleep. But his hand gently stroked his son's hair, betraying his words. You love it and you know it. Petra smiled, turning to face him across Elion's sleeping form. Morning light filtered through the enchanted glass, painting everything in soft gold. Admit it. The fearsome Vampire King is secretly soft. Only for you too. His crimson eyes held hers. The rest of the kingdom still fears me appropriately. Good. Someone has to keep the nobles in line. The reforms had been brutal. 3 more council members had resigned rather than accept the new laws granting humans full citizenship rights. Trade agreements with eastern provinces who rejected the changes had dissolved. There were whispers of dissent in the outer territories, rumors that some nobles plotted in shadow. But there were also human children attending the Citadel Academy now, their tuition paid by royal decree. There were mixed courts where human grievances against vampire nobility were actually heard and judged fairly. There were changes that would ripple through generations. And at the center of it all, a human woman wearing a consort's crown, wielding power that shouldn't exist, reshaping a kingdom one impossible day at a time. Regrets? Sorenvald asked quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Never. Petra reached across Elion to touch his face. Though I do miss sleeping past dawn occasionally. Liar. You're always up before me checking on the new human housing projects. Someone has to make sure the construction crews aren't cutting corners. That's what we have ministers for. The ministers are vampires who've never slept in a building with gaps in the walls. Petra's voice carried the edge it always did when discussing the systematic neglect the previous council had ignored. I know what it's like to choose between food and warmth. I won't let that continue under my watch. Our watch. Sorenvald's correction was gentle. You don't carry this alone anymore. The weight of that truth still surprised her sometimes. She'd spent so long surviving alone, trusting no one, expecting nothing. Now she had a partner who shared every burden, a son who filled her days with laughter and magic, a best friend elevated to chief of royal household who terrorized the staff into treating everyone with dignity. A life beyond anything she'd imagined possible. Elion stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Is it morning already? Barely, Petra said, kissing his forehead. "But your tutor expects you in an hour." The boy groaned dramatically, burying his face in her shoulder. "Do I have to? Father's the king. Can't he just decree that I'm educated enough?" "Nice try." Sorenvald's voice carried amusement. "Education was your mother's condition for letting you start combat training. You want to learn sword work, you master your letters first." "Mother's mean," Elion mumbled, but his arms tightened around Petra. "Mother." The words still caught in her throat sometimes, too precious and perfect to feel entirely real. But Elion said it easily now, without hesitation, as if she'd always been his. As if they'd always been a family. Brutal and tyrannical, Petra agreed solemnly. "Now go get dressed before Isabel comes looking for you. You know how she gets." Elion scrambled out of bed, his power leaving a trail of blue sparkles in his wake as he darted toward his chambers. The door closed behind him, and suddenly Petra and Sorenvald were alone in the vast bed, the morning stretching before them. "So." Sorenvald moved closer, his hand sliding around her waist. "We have approximately 45 minutes before our day becomes chaos. Whatever shall we do with the time?" Petra laughed, the sound free and unguarded in a way it never had been before him. "I can think of a few things." His kiss was slow and deep, tasting of forever and home and impossible dreams made real. When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers, his breath cool against her lips. "I love you," he said quietly. Words that came easier now but still carried the weight of centuries breaking open. "My anchor. My consort. My salvation. I love you too." Petra's hand found his chest, pressing over the heart that beat only for her and Elion. "My monster. My king. My home." Outside their chambers, the citadel was waking. Servants moved through halls with new dignity, wearing the royal livery that now came with fair wages and actual days off. In the council chambers, reformed laws were being drafted. In the city beyond the palace walls, humans and vampires were learning to share space as equals rather than masters and servants. It wasn't perfect. Change never was. There would be more battles, more resistance, more nights when the weight of reshaping a kingdom felt crushing. But they would face it together. A king who'd learned that power without compassion was tyranny. A woman who'd learned that courage could change destiny. And a boy who would grow up knowing that love was stronger than blood, that family was chosen as much as born, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply refusing to leave someone alone in the dark. Later, when the chaos of the day descended, council meetings and diplomatic visitors and Elion's triumphant report that he'd mastered his spell work, Petra would stand on the balcony overlooking the citadel gardens. The same gardens where she'd found a crying child and changed everything. Where a scared maid became a queen. Where impossible became inevitable. And she would smile, knowing that every choice that brought her here, every risk, every act of defiance, every moment of choosing love over fear, had been worth it. Every single impossible moment. The night in the citadel was no longer just for vampires. It belonged to everyone brave enough to walk through the darkness and make it home.